Hello friends, I'm Lydia Foxglove and I am a fantasy author. If you've been following me, you will know that in the past I've been more focused on writing to market. I tried very hard to write romances that were on trend and do everything I could to be a financial success, including rapid release. In the indie world, there's a sizable group of authors who are writing a book every month. I had come from traditional publishing where often if you tell them you have a second book, they're like, wait. And then suddenly I moved to indie and I was on Amazon time, baby, which means you lose visibility after 30 days and you lose even more of it after 90 days. So, chop chop. From spring of 2017 to spring of 2021, that was my peak period, and I wrote 40 books, or like almost 40 books. I think if I actually counted it, it was 38 or 39, but we're not going to quibble. That doesn't make for a very good YouTube title. I also unpublished a couple of them, so if anybody really wanted to count them, you might get 36, but it was closer to 40. Some of these books were on the shorter side, 40 or 50,000 words. Many of them were not. I think 2 of them were almost 100,000 words. I was planning, plotting, writing, editing, marketing one book every month, almost every month. And there are some authors who can keep this up forever, but I am not one of them. I did learn a lot during this time. I also made some big mistakes, and now I'm going to tell you what those were. One thing I learned is that it is okay to write some shitty books. And I know. This is how literature dies. It's all thanks to the ladies reading nothing but smutty, over-the-top romance books about billionaires and aliens with interesting junk. For one thing, Ice Planet Barbarians is a masterpiece, and I will stand by that. But a lot of self-published books are, by any normal writing craft standard, pretty bad. However, this is not new. This is commercial fiction. If you go back to the 19th century, you have people worrying that the women reading the dime novels are going to be the downfall of society and womanhood. There is a long history of panic about people reading trash, and especially women reading trash. How dare they?
And what about reading? There's a leisure time activity that will help you learn things you'd like to know about many subjects.
I know for a fact that a lot of the women who read kind of silly romance books are also reading wonderful literature. It's just that sometimes you want something that's predictable and tropey and just hits exactly the sweet spot that you expect. And if that is what you're looking for, it doesn't necessarily have to be the most brilliant thing ever written. So early on, I struggled with this. I would edit, and it felt like I was never quite hitting the mark. I was editing books like I was still thinking these books would be like picked up by the Junior Library Guild and get a star from Booklist instead of just thinking about my audience and what they really wanted. You don't need to do 20 editing passes, and you will do much better listening to the voice of your inner teenager than following a writing craft book that is using The Great Gatsby as an example of how to write your book. Which brings me to the second thing I learned. If you want to be a successful romantasy author, get in touch with your inner teenager. When I look at the stuff I wrote as a teenager, I had every character experience absurd levels of trauma. Super dramatic wars, more trauma. Broody men, more trauma. Different colored hair, purple eyes, more trauma. And wings. Does this sound familiar? If you have read any popular romantasy book, the answer is probably yes. And of course, this goes for many other genres as well. So when I was doing rapid release, I often found myself thinking, what would my teenage self do here? And beyond writing like a teenager, the even bigger point I had to learn is that you must enjoy yourself when you're writing that fast. You're putting a lot of hours into this. It can't just be a slog. It used to be that when I got stuck in a book, I would start thinking about like the deep themes of the book and like, are all the character arcs correct, and is everyone growing and learning, and does this scene really need to be here, and all this writing craft book stuff. Once I started doing rapid release, I would just be like, is this going to be fun? And truly, this is not the worst idea for writing anything. Often the thing that was fun also happened to be the thing that was like, actually, that's pretty brilliant. And it's not always necessarily a fun scene, of course. Sometimes your character is suffering horribly. Sometimes people who hate each other have to work together. And the thing that is fun also draws a lot of depth out of the characters, as much as any torturous charting of the theme would. I just didn't see the solution until I asked myself that particular question. But okay, so having fun can get you out of a spot where you're stuck. But what about crafting an outline to begin with? At least for me, I can't imagine rapid releasing without some kind of outline, although there are people who do. Nothing I say is gospel for certain, but for me, I need at least like a rough outline. And it's hard to come up with a plot every month. So what I learned is there is no shame in recycling a plot from something else. This is not to say that you should plagiarize other writers. Obviously, do not do that. But you also know there is nothing new under the sun. And I was always trying to come up with something that was new under the sun, which is impossible. I'm not sure if it was because my early writing years was during the rise of social media and we had stuff like Lost and Harry Potter where everybody was really into figuring out the twists. But it used to be that when I plotted, I always felt like it had to be very complicated and have lots of twists and surprise people and have a lot of drama. And the ironic thing is that my favorite stories to read over and over are not even like that at all. So I was trying to write something that isn't even my favorite thing to read. So when I started my indie career and I was writing quickly, I started with fairy tale retellings, and no fairy tale retelling is ever going to be the same. Every author is going to put their own twist on the fairy tale, and the same went for me. And these twists just kind of come to you, which is the magic of telling a story in your own way. But I already had the framework, and this helped tremendously. When I branched out, I already understood that I could not get too precious about plotting anymore. I tended to follow pretty standard paranormal romance and fantasy romance tropes, and sometimes as I was writing the story would actually evolve and get more complex, but I would always have a fairly basic outline to start with and just let it grow organically. I also think it's fine to grab a plot from something that you know when you put it through your head, it's not going to resemble where you got the plot from. So for example, when I was plotting my first reverse harem series, I took a lot of plot points from Fushigi Yugi, the anime, and Final Fantasy IV. And right away I knew that combining an anime and a video game and making it reverse harem and making it a book told in my style, you were certainly not going to think, well, this is just Final Fantasy. It's just that knowing I was pulling from those two things, if I was stuck and I didn't know what to do, I could go back to my source material and be like, okay, this happened here. Here's a good turn of the plot at this point. And that really helped. And I completely acknowledge my source material. In fact, there is a character named Gilbert who is a bard, and that was just a direct homage to Edward the Bard in Final Fantasy, who is known as Gilbert in Japan. And plenty of times when I was working off of this simple plot or a plot I drew from somewhere else, it would start to evolve in all these interesting ways, and what I would end up with, even though I wrote the book in a month or two, would be really good. I think I produced some of my best work during this period, and also some of my worst work. And that's probably not that surprising now that I think about it, because one of the lessons I've really learned over years of writing books is that there is only so much control that you and your writing skills will ever have over how much someone enjoys your work. You can study craft for years, and you should. You can have this amazing critique group, and you should when you're ready. But you will reach a certain point where you know all of the rules pretty well. And it's past that point where you can't control anything anymore. It doesn't matter what advice you get or how many edits you do. Your book still might not resonate with a lot of people. And that's okay. This is no longer a failure or a lack of experience on your part. Your art has worth, whether it's popular or not. I have yet to write a book that really hits with lots of people. The closest thing I came to was Beauty and the Goblin King, but it still doesn't have amazing reviews as an average. And it's not for lack of trying. I've worked with great editors. I've had amazing critique partners. I've edited things to death. I've had good reviews from Kirkus. I've worked on books for years. I've worked on books for 2 weeks. I've written dark, I've written comedic, I've written YA, I've written erotic, I've written epic and cozy and high fantasy and low fantasy, paranormal, fairy tale retellings. I've written short books, I've written long books. No matter what it is, my Goodreads average is always like 3.6, which isn't great even by Goodreads standards. But you know what? I've made a career out of it anyway. And I know that I am a good writer, that I put a lot of work into the craft, and that I have some natural talent. I have certainly gotten enough like glowing praise from people in high positions to know that I have like the chops technically. But in the end, that doesn't necessarily mean you really like hit commercially. So I've had to accept I don't get all the people, but I do find my people, and that's enough. The area where I might have made the most mistakes, and quite possibly everyone does, is that marketing an indie book can so easily overwhelm you. No matter what you do, it always feels like you didn't do enough. And in retrospect, it always feels like you did too much. And this is especially true when you're doing rapid release. You're always writing, and then you gotta be on TikTok, you gotta be on Instagram, you gotta be on Facebook, you gotta have a mailing list, you gotta have Instagram. You gotta keep up with mailing list swaps, you gotta get special editions out, you gotta get audiobooks going. I wanna write. I realize that marketing is a necessity. Social media is almost a necessity. We're all on the same playing field, and I'm not naive about it. But I don't want to run a huge business with assistants promoting my personal brand for books. Some people love that. A lot of writers hate it. What I love is telling a story. And for many years, I tried to keep up with everyone who seemed to be doing all these things, sometimes even with ease. I didn't know where to put my attention. It seemed like it was getting pulled in 20 different places at once. So I was always dropping balls. I was always doing everything in sort of a half-assed, frantic way. But I tried, and I also felt very fake on top of it, because I would like study other people's social media to see what they were doing, to see what was working, and it just wasn't me. So this is the year I threw all of that out the window. I love watching YouTube, so I decided I'm just gonna focus on YouTube. YouTube is not the most recommended platform for writers by any means. In fact, I barely ever see people telling you gotta get on YouTube. But I decided that I need to be out there somewhere. There are a lot of people on YouTube. There are certainly some writers building an audience on YouTube, and more importantly, when I'm on YouTube, I'm going to be authentic, I'm going to be enjoying myself, I'm going to be experimenting in ways that I'm thinking of naturally because I just genuinely like the platform. I feel like here I'm offering something that's genuinely interesting, at least to some people, and of real potential value, and coming from a place that's true to myself. And if it's not the top platform for books, well, it's going to be my platform anyway. I can't be everywhere, and I don't need to be, especially when I feel like I'm not really bringing something to the table. I'm just kind of copy and pasting what everyone else does. And some people do manage to do it all. I'm sure you have a few people in your life that seem like they're juggling everything, but you can't always see the hidden cost. You don't know what ball they're dropping behind the scenes. Some of them might not be dropping any balls. Some of them might naturally only need 4 hours of sleep. But in most cases, we're making difficult choices about how to manage our time. For 4 years, while I was doing rapid release, I built up some really great skills that I'm going to carry with me in my career in the future. And I also kind of wrecked my health, caused myself a lot of stress, worried a lot about what people were thinking of these books, and sometimes felt competitive and sometimes felt really bad about myself. And there might be times in life where you really do need money and you just know this is what I have to do. I have to sacrifice some of my health and some of my well-being. But you should have an exit plan, because I can almost guarantee you're not going to be able to do it forever. Burnout is real. Burnout is very normal. Burnout can happen to anyone, anytime. You are not a failure if you get burned out and you need to scale back or take a break. But however you manage your creative time, I wish you all the success in the world. And if you've been through any periods in your creative life where you were just really pushing hard, I'd love to know what some of your strategies were for managing that, or what you learned, and did you get burned out? How long were you able to keep that up? For me, 4 years. I hope this was helpful. If you enjoyed this video, please click on the like and subscribe buttons. I post every week or so. I talk about various writing, editing, publishing, books I love, and just kind of general creative lifestyle topics. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye. I was always trying. This cat just keeps playing with this toy. Would be really good. Sometimes would be really good. I think you're being naughty. You're being naughty.